This discussion this morning is about let's talk together, again the theme of her, and together, or her. And we have an incredible panel, you'll hear from them shortly. And I'm going to sort of throw out the first question, which is, I tweaked a little bit because Shanika made me think about it. So to talk a little about maybe 3 to 4 minutes, introduce yourself, not the name and career, but really about what's your personal story and journey. To quote Simon Sinek, why do you do what you do? Or to quote Shanika, what makes you plugged in and also powered up. So you want to start, Talia?
Good morning, everyone. Thank you again for coming. I'm thrilled to see all of you here. I do what I do because I am what I do, and I love what I do, honestly. I am a disruptor and an evaluator. The no BS comment that is so me. So I have worked in the for-profit sector and consulting for the social impact movement, and also in the nonprofit sector. I'm self-taught in educational technology product development. So from data acquisition to data management, setting policies, building tech systems, sustainability factors, and feasibility, and then now working more as an internal consultant in government to help promote efficiency and effectiveness in government in the Office of Performance Management. So what got me here was I've just been inherently curious and nosy my entire life, and I just sort of followed my nose, sometimes into the wrong directions, but they ended up being right because I'm here. I grew up in the Midwest, and I have always been the only one of something in any crowd I've been in. So I was the only African American female for a while in some of my grades, and I would tend to stand out and disrupt even back then. It didn't always deter me. I still am human, but I kept going. I'm an athlete. I played sports on and off since I was 3.5 years old, soccer player and basketball player. So it sort of gives a testament to the no BS kind of comment, and I have no problem sort of standing up for anyone, myself included, to be myself, because we deserve a seat at the table. And if there aren't enough chairs, I think at this point we need to bring our own.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, okay.
Cool.
Let's go, bring it on.
Coming here today made me think about the question of leadership and how I see myself as a leader. And when I grew up, I had 2 older brothers who basically picked on me and beat on me every day. You know what it's like to be the youngest girl of 3 siblings. And so basically I decided to find myself as a fighter. But with 2 older brothers that are taller than you and more muscular than you have to find out new ways to fight. And so that led me to think about how I would win in spite of the odds of 2 to 1 against me in every situation. And so from the earliest days, in 4th grade, I organized the sit-ins so that girls could wear pants to school. I know that seems like the 18th century, but it was when I was a child, and I'm only 24. And so, but basically it was hippie days, and I was in 4th grade, and we got a guitar, because we saw the hippies with guitars, and we sat in the classroom going like this. We had no idea what we were doing. And the elementary school principal just thought we were so adorable, and the next day we could wear pants to school. So I do not consider myself a disruptor, because I prefer to think of myself as an organizer and a strategist. And I have been doing organizing my whole life, whether it's from neighborhood organizing in West Philly around issues of low-income rights to organizing resources so that people who have economic barriers can work their way to success, or now looking for ways to build a new political alliance that will save this country from itself by focusing on children, since they are something we could possibly agree on right now. I think that the challenge in this is that in terms of leadership and organizing, it really comes down to figuring out what I have to offer, and what I have to offer is the ability to risk for myself, opportunity, take risk, and use that as a leadership opportunity. And so much about leadership is about risk, and where am I able to put myself out, how much am I able to put myself out, and how can I do that in a way that's really focused on winning as opposed to about me. And so over the years, whether it's getting a school funding formula passed, or getting children's health insurance passed, or working for lots of men and making them look really good, the fact is that we've won a lot for kids and women. And so in spite of the situation that we're in right now, I think we have an awful lot of victories, and they teach us a lot about where we're going next, and I use them to inspire me every day to just keep going.
And I got to say a little story about Donna. When I came to Fels in the 90s, Donna was already a legend at Fels, and we had the guy that directed the program, Dr. Spady, was so proud because he'd always bring this. I don't know if you know this. The stories about Donna in the class, but it was always around how Donna would chain herself to something, and she's like, that's not going to change government. It's not going. She's an amazing strategist. I'm going to turn her into I'm going to take her off the chains and get her inside government. And it's kind of funny, but these are stories and people that influence us. I think he kind of did that. He showed you there was another side, and look what you've done. It's been incredible to watch your career. So
I should say that one other thing about that is, at one point I was an accounting major. And even though I was an organizer, I really felt that follow the money and control the money was the way to really have an influence on the world. And so when I went to my Fels interview and Spady heard I was an accountant, he sort of like fell on his face. But really, this whole idea that women are afraid of numbers is kind of a myth. I mean, women run numbers every day. We run household budgets like that, and we balance all and juggling what we do all the time. And so I do think that part of leadership is controlling budgets, and if you're not controlling the budgets where you are, get control of the budgets.
Just always show me the money. Yeah, so
Great. Thanks, Tine. Good morning, everyone. It's really great to be with all of you. And if I think about my path, I would say that I believe I need to credit my two grandmothers for getting me on the path. They both were incredibly strong women who were really dedicated to public service in their own quiet ways. They never would have thought of themselves that way or described themselves that way, but I was tagging along with them on numerous charitable missions from a very, very young age, and it just became a part of who I was and how I saw myself in the world. So I was very engaged in service activities in high school and in college, and when it came time to figure out what to do with my career, I wanted to go to law school because I felt like a law degree would help me. It would be one tool in my toolbox to save the world. So I didn't go to law school thinking about working on Wall Street or being at a big firm in New York or any place else. I really wanted to do it because I came out of the womb with a very strong sense of justice and motivated by a sense of justice and equality. And I think my parents raised me to believe that there were no limitations based on the fact that I was a girl rather than a boy, and I feel very fortunate for that. So I went to law school with this grand vision. I collected a lot of student debt along the way, and so I had to figure out how to reconcile those things. So I worked at a big law firm in Philadelphia for about 5 years and gained a lot of experience and connections and did as much pro bono legal work as I could possibly get away with and still hold down my job. Made some wonderful connections in the community and ended up working for about a year at the Homeless Advocacy Project in Philly as the start of my public interest career. At the time, I was also beginning to get more engaged in board service on nonprofits in the region and had joined the board of this organization called Women's Way, which was involved in women's rights issues and really looking to get more young women engaged. And I having quit my law firm job and traveled for a couple of months in Europe on a backpacking type budget, came back to the homeless advocacy job, and before I knew it was offered the opportunity to come lead Women's Way, which was a huge leap of faith for that board of directors. I was about 20 years younger than anybody who had held the position anytime recently. So I'm incredibly grateful for that, and always try to remember that as I am thinking about taking leaps of faith with other folks who are at that kind of a point in their career, and I encourage all of you to do the same. But that was a tremendous opportunity that I don't take for granted. One of my former board chairs, Val Gay, is in the room somewhere. There she is. And was a tremendous opportunity to not only influence policy issues around women, but also to just have access to incredible women around the region who are committed to women's causes. And one of the things that we did while I was there was to connect up the grant making we had done to address a lot of the manifestations of inequality in our region with some advocacy work to actually start to dig into some of the systemic issues that necessitated some of those grants in the first place. So several years into my tenure there, the Affordable Care Act was being debated in our country. And in the final hours, you might remember, while we were celebrating the wonderful expansion of coverage, that coverage came at a compromised cost at the very, very end that had to do with women's reproductive health, which actually rolled back access on some of women's reproductive health options. And so it was at that moment, like watching women's health care being tossed around as a political football yet again, that I had the opportunity to move into my current role at AccessMatters, which was another big leap for me into a very different kind of organization, different funding, different size organization, different structure, to be able to work on healthcare issues that impact women and families across our region. And it's a privilege to do that, and I look forward to telling you more about that as we go forward. So thanks for being here.
Cool.
So, hi, I'm Kerry Sautner. I work at the National Constitution Center, like the introduction. I think it's important to kind of think of where I am now, because when you talk about the backstory and kind of what got me here, I'm still trying to figure that out, I have to be honest. What I love about kind of when I look at this, and you get questions like this, and you have to look at your life for a second and say, how did I get here? What I see as a pattern that is the through line with my life is exploration. So how do I keep trying, having failures, and then thriving and taking different directions? So even as a young child, I'm the youngest of 4 extremely hyperactive children, and in my family, you moved a lot, you talked a lot, and we have a very, very loving family. So very different than the speaker earlier. If I called my dad and said, I'm gonna quit something, my parents would be like, it's okay, you can quit. Opposite. But what they got out of it was 4 kids that turned around and said, no, I can't. No, I can't quit. No, I have to work harder. And then they came back with, well, then let me help you get the skills you need to make sure that you can succeed. And so being a child of a mechanic who owned multiple mechanic shops in a completely male-dominated industry, I was not allowed to be able to walk out of the house without being able to rebuild an engine. And he was a part-time builder on the side, so I had to learn how to build the house too. And then with my mom being the accountant for all of this, I had to learn how to do all the math. Really successful tools that you get throughout your life that you hold on to, and then you figure out what you want to do from there. So now when I look where I am, my goal in life for the last 11 years is how do I create and work with informing a citizenry of major children of all ages and help them understand their role in our society, in the Constitution, and their responsibilities to that society. And when I think all the way back about that in my childhood, I see that that's what my parents were giving me as well. It is your role to take care of yourself, to say, no, I can't, when that's what I choose, and then figure out how you push yourself forward. So I've done this now. My undergrad, which is always funny to think about being at the National Constitution Center and then dropping this bomb. My undergrad is actually in biology and marine sciences. Just in case we're on a boat, I'll totally be good. We can help you out. Know how to fish, know which direction to go. Then I moved on to education, and that's really where I found my sweet spot in working with children and working with adults and really understanding what our communities need and working with them. What do they need? Where is their voice in this? Think about it. Your entire life from this moment, sitting on this panel, for me, it's all a learning experience. And I'm learning every step and every moment that I go. So why not make those learning experiences more impactful, more meaningful to the other people you're interacting with, and more diverse for the world? So ask the community what you need and work together as a unit. In the end, hopefully in 2 months, I will be able to be Dr. Sautner, educational leadership. So I don't want to jinx it.
So what do you think, Unica? We're plugged in and powered up? Yeah. It's good. So, all right. So a couple of things that, some of you guys touched on leadership, and I would say there's no doubt here you can feel the passion. And everybody here are passionate on the mission, the disruptors, and there's all these words. But how would, I think, if some of you touched on your leadership and what your traits are, but how would folks, talk about you? I mean, tell you, when someone describes you, what would they say? We heard Lauren a little bit, but how do they describe you?
Oh, geez.
And maybe the good and the bad stuff too.
Yeah. All right. I think
because the bad is good. So anyway,
unexpected. One thing I usually say to folks when they say, "Why are you so quiet?" I'm an introvert naturally in a lot of professional settings. Is I don't quick draw. I have to watch and study the room, how people interact. I don't as an evaluator, it doesn't do the work or myself a disservice, or any is good if I stand out and attract attention to myself. That's not how things get done. Evaluation is not a perfect science. It's an art and a science. I also think folks would say that I am nosy. Every once in a while, I give some good advice. Lauren gave me a lot of credit here. Every once in a while, I have a nugget that I can share. I love to dance. So anyone, my friends, would say that she will dance. I am a collaborator as well. So yes, I have been in some level of competition in sports, or even in some of the schools that I'd gone to. I'm a Penn alum for undergrad and grad school, and then in schools back in Cincinnati, but I want us all to win. I hope we all make it. So finding a way to sort of connect dots and build bridges is more of my speed. And I'd like to think that folks that I'm both in my personal life and professional life would say the same.
Donna?
Well, it's hard for me to repeat publicly what people would say about me. There's a lot of people in this room that know what people say about me.
Remember, all media is good.
So I would say that first of all, what's really uncomfortable about this panel is that we have to talk about ourselves. And so already my palms are sweating. If I could talk about Melissa, I would feel much better. And that is a little bit unique in the world, because I learned in graduate school at Fels that men walked around with brag books. Like they have portfolios that they maintain of the things that they've done in their life. And if they need to sit down and talk to somebody, they have a whole script. And I'm like, holy shit, we're lucky if we can get a resume together and not say I helped as opposed to I did. Aside from being uncomfortable talking about myself, I'm very decisive. I take in a lot of information at once and make decisions. I'm not afraid of failure. I think we learn from failure. I like to not fail. I work on strategies. So if we're working to, let's say, get undocumented children health care in the age of the Trump administration, then I'm working on a strategy to make that happen that might be reflective of the context as opposed to, be nimble and change. I am pretty direct. So both supervisory, in terms of talking to people about things that they're doing well or they're not doing well. I try to remember to celebrate wins, but I sort of feel like celebrating wins takes time away from the next project. That's a bad trait. You need to celebrate the wins. Where I work, we have mandatory fund day. I didn't know that Steve Carell had that on The Office. I started it 20 years ago, and he copied me. But every quarter, we have mandatory fund day, and so we'll go bowling or go to the Russian supermarket or play miniature golf and try to find a way. And even when we were, some of you might remember the city's Welfare to Work program, we had 350 or staff across 9 agencies that had mandatory fund day together. I really believe that people learn to work together by having fun together and by working together rather than talking about it. I'm not a big process person. And then finally, I think it's really important to be civil and to not personalize opposition. So while I have serious concerns about what happened in Harrisburg yesterday, where childcare was cut by 30% and where we've severed a massive increase in pre-K and early Head Start, I don't necessarily say that the individuals who did that was bad. I think they made a bad decision. And so it's really important, I think, to recognize that there's a big public sphere and people mostly come at that for the same reasons. They just see a different way to that solution. And even if I do think they might be kind of creepy, it's not going to help me to talk to them by saying you're a creep. So anyhow, so that's sort of a little bit to start.
I would say that I am definitely motivated by passion. First and foremost, I think that's what drives me and gets me out of bed in the morning. I think that I am pretty calm as an individual, even when things start getting kind of crazy. And in fact, I think that's actually sometimes when I feel most fired up and most plugged in and most able to contribute. And I think some of that is my legal training, that I go into analysis and fix-it mode and problem-solving mode, and I like to assess a situation, look for the risks, think about the communications angles on it. And I remember having to first explain this to my new team when I moved into this job, because I was doing the risk assessment on, all the things that might go wrong, and they were looking like with, like we were only talking about the negatives. And I'm like, no, this is just how my brain works. Like, it's okay, it's gonna be fine, but like I'm trying to anticipate a couple of steps ahead of how this could play out, because in my mind, the communications piece of how you do your work is incredibly important to your maintaining your relationship, your reputation rather, individually and as an organization. And it also plays really heavily into relationships, which are really, really important to me in terms of how our organization functions in the universe. I think that your relationship reputation is incredibly important, and to Donna's point, that means not letting any one transaction dictate it, but building up relationships over time. I would also say that details are really important to me, and that's something where I think there is a balance. You don't want to completely micromanage people, but I think that details are what distinguish you as a person and your organization from the competition. And when you are in the business of being a steward of large grants and lots of large projects, people assume that you are going to be able to handle that with a certain level of professionalism. So I think part of that challenge as a leader is really trying to explain to every person on your team the importance of the role they play, no matter how big or small, and how that plays into the reflection, the image that your organization is putting off, and that how that will then translate into your being able to achieve larger goals, get more projects, extend your relationship. I love working with people who are self-motivated, bright, energetic, entrepreneurial. I think the more I get into my career, the more I look for people who are entrepreneurial and nimble, who don't care so much about what their title is or what their role is right now, but want to be able to move into different spaces and have that flexibility in their mindset. So we really try to hire for that now. And I really look for people with good judgment. I think you can teach people a lot of substantive knowledge, but I want to have somebody who I can give as much autonomy to as possible. And in order for me to feel comfortable doing that, you need to demonstrate good judgment. If I think that you'll raise your hand when you get to that point where you're not quite sure or where there could be a problem, you'll raise your hand, then you can have so much space to run, because that's what I think all of us need, is people around us who have that ability, that desire to take on a lot of responsibility, and the judgment to know when you might be getting in a little of your head or into a tricky political situation, so that we can work it through together.
So with the way I look at my team, and I was walking out of our building today, and my team was like, good luck. What I see with them, and when I think about what they say about me behind my back, which our office space is completely open, so I'm like, guys, I can hear you. I think what I hear from them, which is I find most rewarding, is she's tough. But it's that toughness that comes from wanting them to achieve, wanting them to do better. What I see in the museum field, so I was at Constitution Center now for 11 years and the Franklin Institute before that. What I see in the museum field is a lot of young women who need to be grown, need help and need support, and the only way you're really gonna know what you're doing in this field is to practice in it. So you have to have the ability to fail and learn from the failure. And what I am always looking for is a diverse team. I always think of Abraham Lincoln and Team of Rivals. It's a great book by Doris Kearns Goodwin. But you're looking at, I don't want people bickering with each other, but I want people complementing each other. If I have two of the same, I don't want to be Noah's Ark. I've got some issues on my team. I need diverse skills, and I need diverse complementary skills with each other. So I push them to find what area they fit in and find it for themselves, because I can't find it for them. They need to really push and see where they need to be and put themselves on the edge. I choose to constantly put myself on the edge. I say, if I am not nervous in something that I'm doing, if I'm not anxious about it, then something's wrong. I'm not learning. And everybody needs to learn. So I want them on that edge too. And now I'm not talking anxiety, we need to go to the therapist and have medication afterwards. I'm talking like you need to feel like you're alive. You need to feel that passion, and that passion means you need to be a little bit scared about trying something new. I don't care if we make mistakes. I can't stand the word sorry. I hate it. Don't be sorry. Just tell me, okay, this this is where, if you can analyze what happened, what went wrong, and what you would do differently next time, I want a growth mindset, and that is the best type of employee. So I ask them to do that. And I have to be honest with you, when they're not doing that and they're not complimenting the team and helping the team have a growth mindset, I do get rid of them. So that's where I think the toughness comes in. You are pushed to a level you can succeed, and you need to make sure that you want to succeed, or it may not be the right area for you, and you need to move on. So I think I balance. Most of the time I hear them say positive things.
I think so much of being a leader is also understanding or meeting people where they're at versus sort of just thinking, I think you guys are all unique, you're strong, but we have people around us that make us even better because they have a different complement. And my colleague Nick and I teach leading nonprofits here, and those of you who work with me know I do these tests. We do a bird test, and it's a fun test. It's a Myers-Briggs leadership trait and all those tests, but it puts people in 4 categories. You're either a peacock, an eagle, a dove, or an owl, and I think we have a combination here of sort of two owls that are also eagles and 2 peacocks who are eagles. So we got a nice compliment up here on the stage.
What'd you say?
So
What's Talia?
I would do Talia would be an owl eagle, or you're a peacock eagle. So you're an owl eagle, and you're a peacock eagle. But it's all good. There's no wrong answer here, by the way. It's a great test, but part of this is understanding folks'
It's not just the glasses, is it?
No, it's not. Well, here's another, my former boss, Richard, he loves this. It's a great question, so I have to, and folks here in the audience know I'm going to ask this question. So if you only have 2 choices, are you, from a leadership perspective, are you a murderer or a thief? Which one do you pick? Just quick, don't think too much about it. Think about well, thief and murderer, that's it. Can be both. Thief. You're a murderer.
I get more.
All right.
I'm going for murderer.
All right, so I'm a murderer. All right, so we've got 3 thieves and 2 murderers. All right, so good. All right. So let's move on. I don't know if you guys saw it, but this week's Philadelphia Business Journal front page was just so aligned, and I figured you had something to do with this. The title was Talking Her Up, front page. The lead article talks about the difference between a mentor and a promoter. So I just want to sort of ask you, have the panel talk about them. And I would say just my personal story is there is a difference, and I've been very lucky over the years. I've had lots of mentors, many women, many men, but I've only had a few promoters, and one of them, probably the one that has the strongest influence in my life, is Susan Sherman from Independence Foundation. We started a journey together years ago around nurse-led care, and we're still doing the journal together, but she really promoted, and promoting is different than mentoring. So can you guys talk about some people in your lives that had an impact on you that maybe did the mentorship? It could be men and women, but who promoted you? Talia.
Wow. Talk about a question there, eh? So I think in terms of mentors, there are so many fabulous women in the city that I look up to and admire. One of my mentors is the CAO for the airport, Sade Lewis. She's fantastic and was my favorite professor at Fels. I felt stronger coming out of her class every day, and that's kind of why I came back into government, a big reason. There are lots of folks there's like an army, I kind of feel like, that sort of helped lift me up. And so in terms of promoters, folks like Stacey Holland, who runs the Fest Foundation, or Donna Greenwood at the Fund for the School District of Philadelphia. Those are just a few names of women that I so admire and that have promoted me some, and a lot actually in the last year or two, and that have also helped be a beacon of light when felt like there was no light at the end of the tunnel. Yesterday I hit 1 year in city government, and so without those women and many, many more I could name, I would not have made it.
Well, my trajectory has led me to have that my promoters are men. I actually, when I went to Fels, went for the purpose to work for women in government, and I graduated from Fels and went and worked for Karen Miller, who was the mayor of Reading, and later was the head of the Department of Community and Economic Development at the state. So I would say that Karen gave me a great role model. She was a role model for me of how women operate in government, and she took a risk on me and hired me in spite of the fact that the Reading Eagle ran a week of newspaper stories on the front page about why she should not hire a Philadelphian to come into Reading. So far away, it's such a foreign country. But nevertheless, so Karen, I would say, really showed me how to do this work. But in terms of promoter, it would be insane for me not to say Ed Rendell. For 16 years, I worked for Ed Rendell, and he taught me so much and expected so much of me, and so much of my personal growth is him saying, well, how would you do this? Or wait, you didn't think of that. Or how would you do that? And then constantly making sure I was at the table to be part of a decision in rooms of all men, and making sure that I had the floor to engage. So it's a pretty simple answer.
I would say that in the promoter category, the person who first comes to my mind is Stephanie Nadoff, who's had a number of different roles in, government and private business, and was a partner at my law firm when I was, a WE associate. And she was one of those people. There were very few women partners, and almost none in the healthcare area that I was practicing in. And she came in as an outsider, having been in an executive position at a hospital, and so she wasn't really beholden to the system internally, to the internal politics, and she would regularly come in to me with job descriptions and opportunities for things that required like 8 years more experience than I had, and would say, you ought to think about this, and encourage me to think bigger and beyond what I was even able to see in myself at the time. She would gather groups of young women associates and teach us everything from putting your name tag on this side so that when you shake someone's hand, their eye goes right up to see what your name is, to much bigger political issues that you need to deal with. And she's the person who took me to my very first Women's Way dinner as a 20-something, and in the span of 15 minutes had introduced me to a state senator, the head of a company, some big business, somebody else, and really made me feel very important as a 20-something, and made me think about what I was capable of, and that somebody that senior would invest that time in me made me feel differently, and I think gave me a sense of self-confidence. In between that time, I would say in terms of mentors, and people who have been, kind of guiding me, I've been fortunate to have tremendous board chairs at the organizations I've worked with, and I've established standing meetings with them and communication on a regular basis, and have used them as sounding boards to bounce many things off of. And I think that within my field, the person who I have used most often as a mentor is Helen Cunningham, who recently left as head of the Fels Fund after many, many years, and I continue to have my lunches at Caribou with Helen Cunningham on a regular basis because I value her guidance, and I just think of her as somebody who took a fund that in terms of dollars is a relatively small local foundation, but in terms of finding a niche and finding impact and getting herself at the table and making connections throughout the community had a disproportionate impact on so many people. And I just admire the way she goes about her life, and still use her to this day as a mentor.
So Phil Castellano, and again, I go back to, I have a lot of male mentors throughout my experience, because in the museum field, there's a lot of men at the highest level, lots of women, and then a lot of men at the highest level. Phil Castellano was with me at the Franklin Institute, and he opened the National Constitution Center. And I think he always mentored me along the way. And what he did for me that I thought was the strongest was he saw potential, and he expected me to hit that. So where most people, when they meet you and they have an experience with you, I worked with him for years, and then he left to open the Constitution Center, and 4 years went by. Most people look at you and see where you were, and maybe kind of some growth there. What he saw is where I was in 4 years without even knowing. He could see the future, and he taught me how to trust my instincts and not hide them. And what was flying around in my head, just say it, Kerry, because it's going to be right. That was a huge mentorship for me. As promoters, and in this city and the East Coast as well, there are some amazing female promoters that are your peers, that are your seniors, but are really there for you in so many ways. Two of my favorites are Kathleen Hall-Jamieson here at Penn. Such helpfulness, such amazing advice, and such promotion. And Julie Silverbrook, who runs Consource out of DC. It's really about how do you support each other and promote each other, and also really just make sure you feel that you're not alone. And that is a huge thing for women in this field. So that was a great question and easy. I love my people.
I think the theme here is that it's both. It's both women and men, and I would say I probably have had more men influence me in my life as well. I think part of this is that when you get to a certain level, there are not that many women. Mm-hmm. So now you guys are at the top. So what are you guys doing for females and males? I mean, I think it's both. How are you returning? Paying it forward.
So I try and make, if anyone happens to reach out and wants to say, well, how do I do this, or how do you do it, or anything, I try and make the time every time, even if it's just for a half hour for coffee or lunch, something like that, because someone did that for me. And I didn't get here by myself. I'm not here by myself. And similar to what Monica said, I want someone to take my seat and the seats that I'm going to have down the line. And I think that's how you develop the pipeline. I guess an example is when I worked at a nonprofit doing tech work, one of my interns was Spanish speaking, and she was about to be the first in her family to get a college degree. And she essentially was the reason why there's a Spanish product line. So things she'd never done before, but facilitating focus groups in Spanish to families to really have that close attention to detail before we launched to make sure that we hit the right note and we're culturally sensitive. And now she's teaching and fulfilling a dream of hers, teaching in New York City at an all-girls charter school. So those are the proud moments, and there's so many that I've touched, and I hope that they know that even every time I sit down with someone, they leave something with me as well.
So I don't think I do this good enough. I will say I think there's a lot more that there's a conversation going on right now about a lot of women who are in senior leadership, and how do we start to put something together that really helps people in their 20s sort of leapfrog and learn from us. And there's just not exactly a forum to do that. Fels, there isn't a forum yet to do that effectively. But I will say that, I mean, obviously the thing I do in my job is we have a lot of women at PCCY. And every time there's a job open, I do that. I want the young women who work for me to go run other organizations, right? I'm like, okay, so-and-so, you can do this job. Go apply for it. It's not that I don't want to keep them. They're great. But they need to go run other things. This is a launching ground, PCCY is. So I actively try and get my best staff hired somewhere else, and then work with them to help them succeed where they are. So that's the first thing. The second thing is I try to make sure that the young women on my staff don't make bad next job decisions. So they'll come and they'll say, look, I'm thinking of going here or there. I'm like, don't do that. You know, so I really try and make sure people are thinking through carefully where they're going and staying in touch. So most of the women in the city with whom I've worked over the last 25 years, I'm in touch with where they're going. Somebody recently called me and said, Don, will you help me, blah, blah, blah. I haven't seen that person in 18 years, but she was amazing, and now she's in a position that she wanted. So keeping my network alive and keeping people close to me and making sure they get promoted and grow is one of the things I think about all the time, because there's so much capacity need. And then the second thing I will say is that I teach at Penn, and I think maybe lots of people in this room teach. And I really encourage the women that I teach to go into public service, because I think in public service there's a lot of opportunity to get leadership skills that may not be as available to them as opportunities in the private sector. Not only that, we need them in public sector, in public service. So really make the pitch on why public service matters, but also why you can learn so much that it becomes a transferable skill wherever you want to go, but also has personal fulfillment. Because we have passion, and part of what makes us happy people is that we're passionate. And so what makes a good leader is a happier person. And so I really feel like that's a pathway to go, and it's one of the reasons I teach. I feel really passionate about that. I think the last thing is that connecting, there's a lot of younger women, like I said I was 24, but I actually am twice that. And so, there's women in their 30s and 40s who are now executive directors of agencies, and I am on an endless pursuit to have them grow their organizations and grow their power and grow their leadership. So I'm like, can I call you? And I'll go, look, have you thought about doing this? Have you thought about going that way? Because I really feel like these very talented people are perhaps need somebody who's going to say, take it to the next level, and maybe nobody inside is doing that, or I'm just inserting myself in nosy. But I really think that, thing. Yeah, it's a good thing. You're an evaluator. But I think that really looking at people who are particularly young or women who are running organizations and figuring out how to help them take their next step, I actively pursue.
Great. I would say that internally, I'm always looking for opportunities to push people tad beyond their comfort level. Like, I think there are young women on my staff who are hesitant to do public speaking around certain issues or to take on a certain responsibility, and I think whenever I can, I try to find a way to support them in doing that, but to not let them give an easy no to a request like that, because I have seen people be afraid of that responsibility initially and then really thrive with it and be able to go so much further in their career by getting over some of those initial kinds of hesitations. So I think there are lots of ways to look across your staff and see the piece, the skill set that might be missing in their portfolio that you can see that they maybe can't or don't appreciate the importance of, and to try to provide those opportunities. I also think that in terms of external work, I feel like the niche that I have kind of carved out is that I'm the converted lawyer. You know, I made the jump. And so a lot of young women who are either, there's a group of young women who are just thinking about getting into public interest work who I talk to, and they come to me from a million different angles, and I always say yes to, and people sometimes probably look at my schedule and wonder what the heck I am thinking and doing, but I have lots of breakfast meetings, lots of coffees, lots of whatever, because I get so much out of it too. I get incredibly energized talking to folks who are just about to enter public service and feel so much better about the hands that we are in moving forward. But I also talk to a lot of people who are thinking about making career transitions, who have worked in the private sector, who worked in corporate sector, and who are thinking now, I want to do something different with my life. I need to plug in a different way. And I talk to those folks. Talk to them about how they can position themselves, the kind of opportunities they can look for to be able to get the experience to really make an informed decision about what that looks like, and talk to them about the kinds of ways their skill set translates into what those of us working in this field really need, because they're incredibly transferable skills. You need to be able to connect the dots for the person who's going to interview you, and you need to be able to tell the story of how that translates. But to me, that's another incredibly important piece of how we fill out this field.
So I said earlier that the biggest thing that I like to do, because somebody did it for me and lots of people did it for me actually, is grow the staff, grow their skills, kind of grow their talents, because I constantly send them jobs and they get really offended by it at times, which I'm like, I've been doing this for 11 years. You guys really have to get over it. I'm doing it because I want you to go out there and do more. And I know in our organizations, there's not a lot of movement for you, and people do not stay at one level. Whatever it is, it might not be the job title, but people that think they can just coast and do that one job always drop. So they always need to be pushing, they always need to be learning, they always need to be doing new things. And so I torture them a lot. I force them to reflect on what they want to try, what they think they'll be interested in and good at. Being in a nonprofit, you have a bazillion jobs that need to get done and nobody to do them because you don't have enough money to hire the staff. So there's always opportunity to try a new skill. And to do that, you need to know what you want to do. You can't just take people and say, you know what, Susie, you're going to go here, and Sam, you're going to go here. You can't do that as a leader. You have to let them do it, because you'll put them in the wrong spot. Even though everything lines up for you, you won't be able to do that. So the biggest thing I ask them is to keep pushing and keep trying and try new things, but also they have to reflect on it. They have to give themselves time, reflect on what they want to do and want to try, and what skills they want to gain for what future outcome. And I make them do that not just in our organization, but within the community and in the larger sphere. So I'm constantly making them go to networking programs. I'm constantly making them join boards and help out in other organizations. And not all of them are comfortable with it at first. I have no problem. Do a buddy system. Go together. It is okay to go together, but really have to look at your life holistically and say, what skills do I want to gain for what future outcome, and then where am I going to get them? And that doesn't always mean at work. Sometimes that means personally, sometimes that means going back to school, sometimes that means joining a board and getting them that professional need that you have might be fulfilled outside of your work. So it's really about forcing them to reflect and then making them put it on paper, because I'm a little anal like that, so I want to look at it on paper and discuss it and have time to talk about it.
So what I love about this conversation in the media, you know, whether it's good or bad media, we always get, as women leaders, we get sort of bad rep, but we're not pushing folks, you know, forward. I think on the contrary here. And I would say, from my perspective, there's nothing more exciting. I think you said it with your boss, is that to see somebody, you can see where they will be in 3 and 4 years and they can't, and then help open that road for them to do that, and then give them the wings to fly. I think that's just incredible. You guys are all doing it, so kudos for that. So I want to, you know, sort of sidetrack, well, it's connected. We have a workforce that has, you know, 3 generations in it. You've got the millennials, you've got the Xers, and you've got the baby boomers, and don't get me started on baby boomers, because I think they need to retire and go to Florida. But that's, and no offense to anybody here, but because I think that I'm watching, and you can hear it in accent, it's Danish, and so I grew up in Europe. Europe actually has already, you know, moved, you know, have planned for this. I mean, the Xers, you know, which is a small generation, are running government, and the millennials are in good positions, which much better than here. So how do you build your team, you know, in this with 3 generations in one mix, because they're all very different. So I don't, anybody, it could be all of you or anyone.
Anyone else want to start? I feel like I'm bogarting. Me? Okay. Hi. No. So in terms of my team, I will say right now my team, there's 2 of us for the entire city doing performance management within government. And we are both in our mid-30s. We're both African-American women. So we have to sort of, when we cross-connect and meet with folks and sort of dig in, there is a lot of cross-generational intersecting. I think we just, if I could say anything about how we approach the work, is we're fearless about it, because we know we're good at what we do, and there's a lot of stereotyping around gender, race, age, and what does it mean to be an executive, and are you there yet if you're at a certain level. We're at the table, so we're coming for it. And again, we want everyone to be better and to win, and so one step at a time, one project at a time, that's how we approach the work. I also serve on a board here in the city for Outreach, and I am the youngest board member in the organization's history. I joined the board in my late 20s. And that is a team as well, and there's very multi-generational as well. On the executive committee, I am the only African-American female, on the board, and it's older white men. And quite frankly, I love the dialogue and some of the ways that we push each other. I learn from them, they learn from me. It's not all big, cozy, and warm, fuzzy feelings all the time, but that's the work, right? It's not supposed to be fun all the time. It's not change if it's not uncomfortable. And I think that I've learned how to sort of, again, from being the evaluator perspective, sort of take the temperature of personalities and conversations, but I have gotten less and less afraid of speaking up when I have something to say, just because I look a certain way or I am a certain age, because I want my seat at the table, so.
Well, I agree with Tine that the boomers need to retire. I'm desperate to, I'm not going to go to Florida, but nevertheless. And if we had a retirement system in America that looked like the retirement system in Europe, believe me, the boomers would be out of the economy tomorrow.
So true.
And if we had any faith that the current president wasn't going to decimate Medicare too, so let alone Social Security. It's interesting. I worked at the Center for American Progress, which is a think tank in Washington, D.C., and there were 250 people there. 40 of them were over 40. That was a pretty startling experience for me. I was one of the people over 40. And when we did our sort of staff analysis of what people thought were the big issues, and it's a very diverse organization racially and class, but not by age. Obviously, a majority of the people were millennials. The biggest issue in the staff sort of assessment was, why do the old heads treat us so badly and pretend we don't know anything? And the old heads said, why do they act so entitled? And so, in fact, all of the staff development activities really focused on millennial versus boomer cultural issues. Not women, men, not black, white, Latino, Asian, but millennial versus boomer. And it was a really interesting conversation. I don't think any of us actually changed at all as a result of that conversation, but nevertheless. And that is because of the nature of that think tank is high velocity. The CAP really believes in people coming in for a short period, making contribution and moving on. It's kind of a external to the White House labor force, so if you're not there long enough, you can't really change the culture. But for us, I learned a lot being there, and so I recently hired somebody who's a pretty far-on boomer who's come back from retirement, and And we obviously, because we're an organizing organization, have a lot of millennials. And so we spend a lot of time talking about what makes you think, like, what fed your thought? Like, you know, somebody will say, well, I was talking with a bank president about pre-K, blah, blah, blah. And somebody will also say, well, I was talking in this neighborhood about pre-K, and have them share how they approached the presentation and the outreach, and they can learn from each other. Because the older boomer isn't in the current conversation, and the millennial doesn't have the benefit of the experience in the pathway. So it takes time. It certainly takes time. So if we're not going to retire, we got to learn how to work together better and optimize each other's experiences. The other thing is, obviously, the millennials have a lot of technology skills, and they all think boomers are really stupid, right? So I think they're entitled, and they think I'm stupid. A highly productive environment to try and work together, right? But as long as you can laugh about it, as long as it's on the table, as long as it's like really not about any of us, it's just the environment, then we begin to all like, okay, well, let me show you how to do this, right? Well, all that stuff. And then we can talk to you about how do you sit down with a bank president and talk with them about an issue, where do you start? So it's a definitely challenging, you know, this is very different. I've been in the labor force, I don't know for how many years, I guess 30 years, and the boomer to millennial cultural divide is the biggest cultural divide I've experienced. There may be people otherwise who experience different cultural divides, but that's certainly a big one.
And sort of the pool, the extras, and I would say you were, you know, I would put you in the extra boomer. You're an extra.
Yeah, yeah, I'm in the last year.
I was going to say you're an extra for all intents and
Yeah.
purposes.
I'm right
but
there
I was
with
like, because it varies, but I don't think you have enough of the balance of the extras. And I do think there's a whole, you know, we do a lot of work. We, as part of the leading nonprofits, we just kind of look at the dynamics. We spend a whole class on that because there are three cultures, and the extras, there is a small group, and they're not really. The extras now beginning to lead. Maybe 10 years, and that, I'm serious, because I've looked at what has happened in Europe. I mean, it's 10 years later than they're ruling anywhere else. So now, which means that you create a backlog for the phenomenal millennials, and I am a fan of millennials. You know, I've always, because they have the energy, the passion, and the drive as well. You know, and maybe, except you have to figure out how to reinvent the job every 15 months or maybe even 12 months, but that's a different issue.
And they should be running the organization.
And they should be on the organization, but we could figure that one out. But I think that it's an interesting, you know, part of it. So Melissa, any thought on how you're doing that?
Yeah, you know, I was just going to say that we all kind of joke about these trends, but I think we also have to be careful not to completely stereotype, because there are exceptions. And I think the worst thing we can do is to presume when somebody comes into our workforce in a certain age category that they're going to behave a certain way. And I know all of you mean that. But, you know, I say that I've got, you know, I went from coming into this organization 6.5 years ago and being the youngest person by far on the leadership team, and now having that crew pretty much retire and be replaced, and now being just about the oldest person on the team. There is a real transition, and I did not, I'm still working through that and figuring out how to best support and how to play a different role myself with this different team. But I say about the stereotypes because one of the members of my team is in his 30s, and my leadership team is in his 30s, and people have affectionately nicknamed him Pop-Up because he is such an old soul in so many ways.
Not like
and
Pop-Up.
like, you know, like Grandpa, and so you can't always tell. And one of the things that it's made me think about is you know, re-examining my own presumptions about what motivates somebody or what is, to me, a clear path. And I'll give you an example. So a couple of years ago, we had a millennial on our staff. She was in a position, we realized that we needed to elevate the responsibility level of this position. It would now include budget responsibility, it would have a higher salary, a higher title, and we went to her and we said, you know, here's what's happening, we can't keep this position as it is, we're going to transition it to this, but we're going to give you several months to get to that place, we're going to provide you support along the way, and this is what it's going to look like at the end. And she said, well, I'm going to have to think about that, and I'm going to have to talk to my parents. So I'm going to do that, and so can I have a little time to do that? And we said, okay. And she came back and she said, you know, it's just not what I want. And she didn't have another job to go to. She ultimately decided she was going to go back to school. But I remember in that moment thinking to myself, oh my gosh. I mean, to your point, Unique, when I told my dad I was leaving my law firm, my dad, who was a lawyer at a small firm and who saw me at this big firm in Philadelphia and said, what are you thinking? But then became, my biggest champion for doing what I do now. But I remember thinking, I cannot imagine calling my parents saying, my job thinks well of me, well enough they want to offer me a promotion, training, a higher paying job, a title change, and saying, no thanks. And she was a great employee. She understood this meant her current job was ending in 3 months. She was a fabulous employee till the final day, left on good terms, would probably come back and volunteer with us. But I could not understand that. And I had to challenge myself to say, you know what? Maybe her approach is way more honest and open to who she really is. For those of us who would say, well, you should take it and use it as a stepping stone, and even if you're only going to be there for a year, you get something out of it. She knew it wasn't what she wanted. It wasn't on her path. And she was really clear about that. And I had to re-examine, and I learned a lot from that experience. Still is hard for me to process, given my upbringing, given my background, given my mentality. But it is a really interesting lesson in people being able to do a fine job in a different way than you would do it.
And this is a person that understood her core. It's pretty incredible, yeah.
She might have had my parents. My parents were outside of their generation. So I think, not direct reports, but because the volunteers of the museum fall under me, I have a huge range of ages. So I have 15-year-olds to 88-year-olds as our oldest volunteer. And there are times when everybody's working together and everybody always has an opinion. There is one thing that the National Constitution Center is really good at, is having an opinion about what we should do. And so it's how do you communicate that? It gives me the opportunity to really cross the ages. And then also, at first when I started to do this, I realized it wasn't really working well. And one of the reasons why is people couldn't see the positive of the other person. They saw them as, oh, you don't know what you're doing, you're too old, and you're too young, and you are entitled. And you could see that. And so what I had to do as a leader and then teach my team to do is highlight and communicate over and over and over again what that person is bringing to the table and how that is going to help the bigger strategy and the bigger holistic view. And so we had, as a leadership team, how to pull that out and how to validate somebody. So if somebody was looking at somebody else because they didn't understand the technology, it was pointing out what they were bringing to the table and also what that person could do to help empower that person, that they had a responsibility. And it wasn't patronizing, it was that's what you do as a team member. You work as a unit. What I have noticed in the last few years, and it makes me laugh, is the millennials on my team calling the other teams millennials and calling them out for being millennials. It's hysterical. They're like, oh, there's millennials in design. I was like, you're a millennial. I'm like, so I do think sometimes I don't see the age brackets really defining the person. I see the work ethic. Sure. And what's easy for us at work is saying, reminding everybody, it's like Sisyphus. You got to say it a bazillion times and keep going up that hill even though the boulder comes back down. Why are we here? We're here for the kids. Put that up there, put that high, and everybody lines up underneath that. I don't care how you get there, you support each other because we're here for the kids and we're doing this. And that really resets everybody. So it's really communicating, it's really forcing the relationships because you do have to force them, and then it's really just mitigating it along the way. That's what I've used, and it's worked really well. And I've seen really strong relationships from our youngest and our oldest people just grow over the years and become mentors to each other and moving forward. It's been fantastic.
So why don't we I have a couple more questions to close it, but why don't we take audience questions, because it's such a fabulous group. And I think there's mics around, right? Yeah, we have one question there.
Hello. Thank you so much. I've been taking lots of notes. I really appreciate everything you've been sharing. So I was having brunch with someone a couple months ago, and he introduced to his executive leadership team a plan to extend paid family leave at his company. Surprisingly enough, he said the most opposition he got from his executive leadership team were from some of the older women. And my question to you is, how can we reach and influence some older women in leadership positions who may have came up in a time where society was not very supportive of their efforts to balance family and career, and encourage them and influence them to become fellow feminists.
Anybody want to take that one?
Well, I just wonder how that conversation happened and why those women took those positions. So we're working on an assumption from your story that they might have responded that way because they weren't feminist. And they may have responded that way because they knew if there was paid leave, it might cause women to fall back on the career ladder. They might have known that women would start to get blamed for an expense of the firm that men are not bearing. Like, I don't know actually what happened there, right? So I would want to know a little bit more before I assume that they just weren't on board with the fact that you got to stay home for a little bit with your kid. But I think that's often, getting a little bit deeper into what motivated, whether it's a man or a woman, to not recognize that there's certain work-family balance issues that are going to make everybody a more productive employee. And understanding that there are lots of women have concerns that if we start to accommodate these things, it will further erode the status of women. I don't buy that, but that's a conversation I need to have with them. So as opposed to, well, I didn't have that, so why should somebody else? And then the other question is, if you're the leader of a firm and you're putting paid leave on the table, and some people are raising simplistic arguments, like I didn't have that, so nobody else, fine, thank you very much, moving on, we're doing that tomorrow. Like, what do I care? So I think that I don't know enough. I don't know if other people have a comment, but that's sort of like I would want to know a little bit more.
Yeah, I mean, I think that you have to look at it in the present time, regardless of somebody's past experience, and look at it as how you're going to attract and retain talent now. And I think that more and more, I mean, one of the things that I think, if we're going to generalize about generations and millennials and everything else, I think that it's really putting on the table the fact that you want a balanced life. And I think that is an encouraging push for all of us to be examining. And I think we're going to need to be more creative in how to recruit and retain people and make them feel as though their work and their family can interplay. And I think that goes to how we model the way we live our own lives as leaders. I think that is reflected back in the kind of policy that we put in place in our organizations, as well as how we live day to day, because that's the other piece, is that you can put progressive policies in play, but if they're not reflected in the way you lead, people will still think that, well, that might be on the books, but in order to succeed here, I can't actually take advantage of that time off because I'll be penalized, or something negative will happen. So I think it's both looking at it as a retention issue, but then modeling it and making sure that whatever you're putting down as a policy is really reflected in the day-to-day practice at the organization.
And I think in terms of the sector that I'm in the health and human services sector, which is I grew up in a country that gives women at least 12 months, and men now fought to get 6 months a paid leave. These are paid leaves almost at 100%. So I would say, and that's the Scandinavian model, et cetera. Nobody could afford that here, and I think it often becomes a budget issue. If you are working in a field like the human services field, the reimbursement is not there. So I think part of it is even further than, it's not just the employer, it's actually going to sort of the policy level. What Donna did in Harrisburg and at the federal level, pushing for salaries, and that's where I think we need to organize, because it becomes a retention issue. And also I would say in our jobs in the human services field, we lose people left and right that are talented, and getting them back and it's costing us actually more money, whether it's overtime, et cetera, because we've lost talent that simply said, it's actually more expensive for me to go to work for you, even though I love to work, let me stay home now and actually take care of you. So I think that these are social policies. And here's what I would say is that what I like the millennials, I teach a lot of health policy, and don't know if folks are seeing this, but I'm seeing the millennials are going to drive this. I have a kid I have a son who's 16. He sounds even, I would say, more Scandinavian than I ever was, and his friends sound like that too, and his girlfriends sound like that too. So something's going to change in this country, maybe in parts of the Western world, if not the whole world, because it's a different breed that we're seeing growing up. So as much as we say that these generations in the workforce, well, the reality is that baby boomers will retire, the X Xers, I don't know what about us, but we're such a small percentage. I think we'll be more aligned on this issue, but we're going to have to create some huge social policy at some point in this country. We're not there yet, obviously, with what's going on, but we will get there, and it's going to be very interesting to watch. And then it's organizing everybody and figuring out how we can afford it, because being a big employer myself, it's a money issue. How do you cost it out?
But can I say one thing about your question, which I really liked, which is you said, how could we persuade that person to become more of a feminist? And I think the question is, how can we persuade, is really, really important. So Melissa pointed out that the argument that might win that person would be that if we want the best and most talented staff, we're going to have to offer a really competitive benefit to women. So the question is, what's going to persuade them as opposed to what you want to say. Like, I want to say, are you friggin' kidding me? And I wouldn't say friggin'. People know that, right? But the point being that how am I going to persuade her or him? And so, I think that that's sort of when we're going to Harrisburg or we're going to Washington, we're talking with legislators, our issue isn't to tell them what we think. Our issue is to think about what they think and how to persuade them. So I'm just really glad you're asking the question, because thinking about how you do that as opposed to what you want to say is critical to success.
And I would say, look at the men too. I mean, that's a reality. I mean, I don't mean it, but my husband, I would say, is more than Mr. Mom. He's very happy at being that. And that's sort of like, I think we also have to look at gender roles and be supportive of our males that support us in our roles and what we're doing.
And I think it's key in women's issues to have an open dialogue, to talk about it. Because I think so many times everybody nods at somebody saying that on the board, assumes what the reason is behind it, and then the dialogue stops.
That's right.
And then everybody walks away. And I think when we look at any women's issues at any level, the fact that when I look at our board and see so few women, we don't have I'm not bringing up that conversation. That was my thing today when I looked at this and I thought about the women, not just where I am and below me, but the women above me. I need role models too. I need people on our board that are advocating for this. I need to open my mouth and have a dialogue, and in a way that is listening, and that is an open conversation that's reflective. Democratic dialogue on this issue would be huge right now, and very, very important.
We had a question? Yeah.
Good afternoon, and thank you all. You've been amazing. I am a baby boomer. You know you're in trouble, right?
I'm in trouble. But I'm in trouble all the time.
And I am retired. And I am in the neighborhood doing a nonprofit that I didn't want to have to do because I always wanted to work my way out of a job. Donna, thank you for helping me work my way out of the first one. And if it weren't for the baby boomers that see what our young moms and our young fathers are struggling with and not succeeding with, what would society really be? I need you guys to speak to the empowerment of the disenfranchised that are still a throwaway society in the United States that I work with every day, the moms in the shelters, the men who are standing on the corners because they don't have anything better to do. I need you guys to speak to that and tell me as a baby boomer, when can I retire? I'm 62, by the way, with 7 children and 22 grandchildren.
You know that the best sign in the Women's March is, I can't believe I'm still marching for this shit. It's like, it's insane.
It's insane.
But it's going to be the boomers that are going to save this country, because the millennials are working really hard. And I was in Washington. How many people were in Washington? I would say that crowd was about 60% boomers, right? A lot of retired people, and they better be down there every month, because this corner that this guy's on, and the mother's walking by with the kid, and they can't read, that's not going to change unless the boomers are down in Washington every week. I mean, we have a lot to do right now, unfortunately. We kind of screwed up, so we're just going to have to work harder.
I got to clarify what I meant. So this is exactly what boomers should be doing. So now you can teach everybody, and we're going to have a little scheme for you on that one. I think it's more, my thing is more in the leadership roles in terms of making sure that, that we give room for everybody, because I don't think we have. In Philadelphia, we've not been good at that. I mean, poverty in this issue, the inequalities and issues. I spent 25 years in Philadelphia working on all kinds of issues, now working with some of the most disenfranchised on the intellectual disability. It's the same thing. We do this really bad in this country, really bad. And unfortunately, I have a lens for how to do it differently. Unfortunately, there's a tax system in the country I grew up in that's about 70%. So it costs money to do it the right way, but I've seen it done the right way. So I think it's an issue. So yes, the baby boomers, we need to, we need them in Washington, and then we need to give the millennials the political strategies, the skills, like everybody up here has it, so we can actually empower them the right way. Because I think that sometimes, the younger ones can get a little lost because a lot of this takes politics, and I didn't get to ask this question, so maybe I'll throw in a political question. What's the role of politics in all of this? I mean, you guys are all, you make it sound easy, but this is a lot of politicking to get where you are now and how you're successful. So maybe just talk a little bit about strategy and politics, because I think that's what it's going to take.
Yeah. So like small p politics.
Small p or big P.
Or big
both.
P.
Yeah, both.
Yeah, I mean, I think that as you're moving through your career, ideally, if you are plugged in, as described earlier, in a way that you're pursuing a path that is very much who you are as a person, I feel like you can do that. You can make the political moves in a way that are not just self-serving, because I think being political is often perceived as being, a little bit sneaky, a little bit self-serving, which is crazy. I mean, really what we're talking about is being strategic about the things you get involved with, the choices that you make, the networks that you align with, the people that you make introductions to because you want to find out what they're doing and you want to be more like them or learn from them or do whatever. And I think that if you're doing work that really resonates with you as a person, that doing that is both enhancing your own personal development, expanding your own personal network so that you can get the support you need as a developing leader, but is also advancing the issues that you care about and the organization you work with. I mean, I feel like a lot of the things I try to do, they're aligned. Are they helping my personal development? Is being here today, giving me an opportunity to hear from women I admire and to be part of this group? For sure. Personally, this is filling me up. But also, it's exposure for the issues and organization I work with and then the passion that I have there. And so I think there are a lot of ways you can try to do it where you're thinking about where you want to be down the road, in the next couple of steps down, which you always have to be doing. Because in spite of the example I gave earlier, I do feel like every job that I have done from the time I was 15 on, I can tell you the skills I learned in it that have helped me where I am today. And I would put waitressing at the very top.
Yes, waitresses unite.
Cleaning.
So I would just say I think that being political gets a bad rap, and it's about being strategic in ways that serve you and your cause.
Yeah, I would add, first of all, I want to thank you, ma'am, for our baby boomer who asked that question. As a millennial, that is what empowers me, is to hear stories like that, because we're not done till we all make it. And I think that, as we're learning across generations how to continue in this fight, because we're not all in it individually, we are a team, I think that politics is a part of it. So I agree 100% with what you said. One of my career in my technical, whatever, professional toolkit is being a tech project manager. And one of the best things I can tell anyone who's interested in that job, and it's related to politics, is when you're standing still, you have got to be 5 or 7 steps ahead of yourself, because that's how you stand a system up, and that's how you're able to assess the feasibility and longevity of it. I say that because when you're in politics, it's also the same thing. Being narrow-minded, looking just down one aisle is not going to get it done. So as you're looking about the networks that you build, or the networks that maybe you sort of walk around, or how you sort of interact with people, but staying humble, because humility is a huge part of politics, I think. I think that's the way that you sort of, or at least for me, it's been an experience to maneuver my career, and to always think about what's next for myself, or have others who think about what's next for me when I can't see the light. So
I got to give Fels a plug here, because I think some of the secret sauce we always talk about at the Fels Institute of Government is really the understanding of being political savvy, whether it's Machiavellian and all this stuff. And I think it trains everybody. Everybody can become political, can become strategic, and I think it's a skill that they hone in all the students there. So I'll plug for them. So I think I'm going to end, because we have to end, and I have one final question. And since now Jennifer's going to get us together every year, so let's pretend we get together in 10 years from now. So what changes would you guys have liked to see for women in leadership in our society. And I would say, throw in, how do we use and leverage and take care of this politics, this power and strategy and all energy that's in this room? How do we leverage that in partnership so we actually can, help each other? So, ending question.
I think perseverance and being okay with failing at any age. I think, it's so often when you're going up against or alongside male counterparts or multi-generations, there's this inherent need to sort of compete and sort of silence. But one of my mentors told me this week, you always have to stand your ground. Stay still. Don't stay still, but stand your ground as you're moving forward. Don't be deterred. And that's perseverance. And that filled me up. And I needed to hear that this week. So as more of us take seats at the table or prepare seats for others, I think we just keep going. Fearlessly, you're going to get your feelings hurt, but it's not personal because we have a lot of work to do. And with some of the power I can always sense in this room, I think we're going places. And so I'm excited to see what we all do next.
Well, I guess it would be a little bit trite to say that the Congress and the legislature had a representation of women parallel to the proportion of women in our population, right? So obviously we have a long way to go in the legislature where we have the smallest share of women in the country. But I really think that in 10 years from now, I would want to see that we had a society where resources were more equitably distributed, because that meant that women had a role in changing things. It's not that men won't do it or can't do it. It's that I don't think they will do it unless there's more women in power. So women in power is the vehicle to a more equitable society, and one that really believes that education is the pathway to a safe, democratic, and thriving economy. And so they would be my measures of 10 years. We should get that done.
Yeah. On the list.
Donna and I are clearly on the same page on our measures. Everybody up here, I think, is probably on the same page on our measures. But I was really looking forward to a time when there was more equal representation in all spheres, in nonprofit leadership, including up at those levels where we tend to hit a ceiling in corporate boardrooms, in corporate C-suites, and in the government. And I do think it's because when women are at the table, different conversations are had. We have different experiences. We live our lives from a different perspective. And it's not that there are not great feminist men who will advance some of these causes, but I think, as we talked about earlier, everything boils down to money and what's in a budget, whether it's a state budget or a corporate budget or a nonprofit budget. Those are policy decisions. You can't separate them apart. Decisions are made at those tables, and we fund certain agendas or we don't fund certain agendas. And I think that different issues rise to the top and are given more prominence when more women are having the discussion. So I would really like to see that happen. I think that I'm really energized by the number of women who have become politically engaged since our last election. I think that everything I have seen shows that women of both parties are interested in running for office at higher numbers than ever before. And I think that's a great sign and a great starting point, and look forward to seeing that trend continue and to seeing how we all can support those efforts.
So I'm just going to echo pretty much everything the panel has said. So right now I'm doing research, and it's looking at how new police recruits understand individual rights and social justice. And what I'm hearing up here is very similar to one of the pieces that I pulled out yesterday, where a young recruit said, "I'm not sure people will get it if they've never felt loss." And so what he was talking, I still get chilled I read it 30 times and I still get chills every time I read it. And what he was talking about was rights. I'm not sure if this guy's gonna get it because he's never had his rights taken away. Mm-hmm. And this is exactly what you're saying. If we don't have a diverse leadership at every level, it's not saying that people can't empathize with somebody else, it's not saying that people can't understand what somebody else is, but you need that table to be as diverse as your entire community. So therefore, all the voices are going to be heard. Because sometimes you may get it, but sometimes when you experience it, you understand it from a completely different perspective, and that perspective is needed. And at the table, at the boardroom, and at every level in our society. So I want to encourage our young girls that we work with and our young boys to really make sure that they're having a diverse community in every level. And this is huge for us to move us forward. And it's been years that scientists globally have been looking at this world and saying, okay, women have overtaken overtaken the population. So, okay, we're overtaking the population. Now we just move on to overtake all the positions as well. Not all in the right perspective, but we really need, it is that the energy that you feel. I am with you. It's in this room, it's across our community, but it's globally as well. It is about time, and we need to move things forward. And I think 10 years, we got to do it. We need to set something in the ground and go towards it.
And I would say right now, more than ever now in this country that is divided, we need more diversity and more women at the table, because I think we need to bridge, whatever's going on in this country so we can become whole again. So I think it's Jane Austen that said, it's not what you say that defines you, it's what you do. These guys are phenomenal. Give them a round of applause. So.